They say money builds castles, but it cannot warm the bed. The Myers estate stretched across the California coast like a promise carved into marble, huge, gleaming, and just slightly lonely. At sunrise, the waves would kiss the cliff below the balcony, but the sound barely reached Layla Wilkinson Myers. She stood in front of her vanity, staring at her reflection. A woman who looked expensive, but felt discounted. The diamond bracelet on her wrist caught the light and mocked her quietly. Somewhere in the house, automatic blinds hummed open on a timer, her husband's idea of efficiency. Leonardo Myers believed that if life could be scheduled, love could be maintained with reminders. Their mornings had turned mechanical. A voice-activated coffee maker replaced Good Morning, a household app, scheduled kisses the way one scheduled board meetings. It was romantic, in a tax-deductible sort of way. Layla smiled at the absurdity of it. "Alexa, make my husband emotionally available," she muttered. The smart speaker blinked blue, misunderstood, and started playing jazz instead. That was the closest she'd laughed in weeks. Downstairs, the dining table could host a diplomatic summit, but this morning it seated three: Layla, Leonardo, and the elephant of silence. Leonardo, immaculate in a navy suit, scrolled through emails while a chef hovered near the counter, pretending not to listen. Layla spooned oatmeal she didn't want. "Morning," she said. He nodded. "Morning." His eyes never left the phone. She waited, hoping he'd ask how she slept. He didn't. Instead, he said, "Don't forget we have that investors' dinner tonight, 8 sharp." Layla raised a brow. "Is that the one where everyone pretends to like each other while calculating who's richer?" A ghost of a grin flickered across his face. "You're getting good at reading the room." It was humor, yes, but hollow, like a compliment delivered from across a canyon. He stood, kissed her cheek lightly, and left. His cologne lingered longer than he did. By noon, Layla was performing her role, the billionaire's wife, perfectly packaged. She attended a charity brunch chaired by Cameron Compton, a socialite whose hobby was comparing handbag sizes. Cameras loved Layla, her poise, her tailored pastel dresses, but none of them caught the exhaustion behind her smile. Cameron leaned close. "You're lucky, darling. Leonardo worships you." Layla stirred her drink. "He used to. Now he just funds my existence." Cameron laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. Across the room, reporters snapped pictures, whispering about the power couple. Layla imagined their captions: "Beauty and the Billionaire, still going strong." She wondered if they'd ever use a truer one: "Beauty and the Billionaire, still going separate ways." She excused herself early. The drive home was silent, except for her driver, Abner Campbell, humming old rock songs under his breath. "You all right, ma'am?" Abner asked softly. "I'm fine, Abner. Just allergic to small talk and fake pearls." He chuckled. "That makes two of us." The house welcomed her back with a chill. She dropped her purse on the console table, where a row of unread luxury magazine issues sat like trophies. Her reflection in the glossy cover looked perfect. She felt nothing like it. She wandered into Leonardo's office. It smelled of cedar and ambition. On his desk, 3 phones buzzed in unison, a symphony of productivity. Next to them sat a framed wedding photo, a much younger Leonardo grinning, Layla radiant, looking at him instead of the camera. "Where did you go, Leo?" she whispered. From behind, the butler, Leonard Montoya, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, shall I prepare dinner for 2? Layla smirked. "Make it for 1. The other seat's taken by a spreadsheet." She poured herself a glass of wine, something vintage enough to taste like nostalgia, and stared at the ocean through the wide glass wall. Waves crashed, gulls cried, and she thought of how every sound outside this house felt more alive than the man she lived with. Later that night, as city lights blinked like tiny lies across the bay, Layla sat on their balcony, and remembered the first time Leonardo had said, "I love you." They'd been in Rome, eating pizza on a fountain ledge because the Michelin star place had lost their reservation. He'd looked at her, cheese on his sleeve, and said, "You're the most real thing in my unreal life." Back then, his laughter was unguarded, his hair a little messy, his dreams still shared aloud. She'd fallen in love not with the billionaire, but the man who joked that he could trade all his stocks for one more night like that. Now that man existed only in photos and shareholders' anecdotes. Her phone buzzed, a calendar reminder from Leonardo's assistant, Addison Sullivan. "Don't forget Mr. Myers' speech rehearsal tomorrow, 9 a.m. She stared at it, sighed, and typed back, "Copy that. Tell Mr. Myers I'll clap appropriately." Addison replied with a heart emoji. Irony was alive and well, at least on her screen. By 8, Leonardo finally returned. His tie hung loose. Exhaustion made him handsome again, but the distance remained like an invisible wall. Layla greeted him. "Long day at the Empire? Meetings then, a flight reschedule." He loosened his cufflinks. "You should have eaten without me." "I did. I toasted our marriage with Merlot and sarcasm." He gave a dry laugh. "Barely." "Don't start, Layla." She leaned on the counter. "Start what?" "Talking." He sighed, pouring himself whiskey. "You know I'm doing all this for us." "For us," she echoed. "Leo, you haven't looked me in the eye long enough to know what color they still are." Silence thickened between them, until even the fridge's hum felt judgmental. He left for the study. She watched his back disappear through the doorway, realizing T-hat. The man who once fought the world for her now couldn't stand 5 minutes of honesty. At midnight, Layla couldn't sleep. She wandered through hallways lined with art worth more than some country's GDP. The motion lights flicked on as she passed, little spotlights for a performance she didn't audition for. She paused in the kitchen, found the chef's leftover tiramisu, and ate it straight from the pan. Perks of being emotionally neglected, she told herself. No one to judge my dessert crimes. In the distance, she heard Leonardo talking on the phone, his voice low, businesslike. Words like acquisition, merger, and expansion filled the air where Goodnight used to live. Layla shut the fridge, muttering, "I hope your merger tells you she loves you back." She laughed softly, half amusement, half ache, and padded back to their bedroom, where his side of the bed looked as untouched as his conscience. The next morning, Layla decided if her husband wouldn't hear her, she'd talk to someone else. She booked an online therapy session under her maiden name. Dr. Caroline Cabrera appeared on screen, cheerful as sunlight. "What brings you here today, Miss Wilkinson?" Layla smirked. "A private island, a wardrobe crisis, and an emotionally unavailable billionaire." Caroline blinked. "That's specific." Layla chuckled. "I'm married to one. Does that count as a disorder or a survival story?" It was the first time someone laughed with her in months. They talked about love turned to routine, about the ache of being envied for a life she didn't enjoy. When Caroline asked if she still loved Leonardo, Layla hesitated. "I think I love the man he used to be," she said softly. "The rest of him is under construction, possibly permanently." Later that week, Leonardo organized another high-profile dinner. The guest list included investors, celebrities, and one nervous senator trying to look casual. Layla played her part again, smiling, nodding, posing beside a man who treated her like a campaign accessory. When someone asked Leonardo about his secret to success, he said, "Discipline, strategy, and not letting emotions cloud judgment." Layla raised her champagne flute and whispered under her breath, "Well, that explains the weather forecast at home. Permanent frost." A guest overheard, laughed and said, "You two are adorable." She smiled. Humor was her invisibility cloak. But inside, something fragile began to crack. That night she returned to their bedroom to find a new designer dress laid out on the bed, still tagged, still soulless. A note from Leonardo read, "Wear this tomorrow, Investors love red. She stared at the dress for a long time before hanging it back in the closet, beside dozens just like it. Standing by the window, she whispered into the night. Downstairs, the ocean kept roaring, patient and endless, everything their love was supposed to be. And as Layla turned off the lights, the camera of the mind would linger on her silhouette framed by moonlight, beautiful, alone, and quietly preparing to rediscover the woman behind the title. Long before assistants managed their schedules and stylists approved their outfits, Layla Wilkinson and Leonardo Myers met by accident, or destiny wearing a tuxedo. It was 5 years earlier, at a charity gala hosted by Addison Sullivan, a woman whose perfume alone could fund a small village. Layla had been working backstage, helping set up the silent auction, her hands covered in glitter and tape residue. Leonardo had just escaped a conversation about tax loopholes and wandered in search of air that didn't smell like ego. When their eyes met, she was balancing a tray of canapés and muttering, "If one more shrimp jump ship, I'm quitting." He laughed, actually laughed, and offered to help. "You look too serious for someone carrying appetizers. I take shrimp integrity very seriously," she shot back. By the end of the night, they'd shared 2 drinks, 3 jokes, and a cab ride that felt like a movie scene missing its soundtrack. Their first months together were a collage of chaos and chemistry. Leonardo loved that Layla wasn't impressed by wealth. She teased him about his obsession with productivity apps and once relabeled his office folders empires and egos. He retaliated by learning to cook spaghetti just to impress her, a dish that somehow required 2 fire alarms and 1 very forgiving smoke detector. Their laughter became the rhythm of their world. Sunday mornings meant pancakes, lazy jazz, and newspapers they never finished reading. Nights were for wine and ridiculous hypotheticals like, "If I lose all my money, will you still love me?" Her answer was always, "Depends, did you lose it, investing in crypto again?" Then came the merger that changed everything. Leonardo's company went public, his fortune tripled overnight, and so did the demands on his time. Suddenly, the man who used to sleep through alarms was waking up before dawn to talk to people in different time zones about things Layla didn't understand and didn't want to. His desk filled with contracts, not postcards. Her evenings filled with waiting. The first missed date stung. The second felt normal. By the 5th, she stopped dressing up for dinner altogether. One night she joked, "Should I book an appointment to see my husband?" He looked up from his laptop, funny, then kept typing. The warmth that once lived between them was cooling into something polite and scheduled. Their new home was a mansion built to impress everyone, except its inhabitants. The marble floors echoed when Layla walked alone. Reporters called it the dream residence of America's power couple. She tried to bring laughter back, surprise picnics, handwritten notes in his briefcase, even a weekend getaway disguised as a business retreat. Leonardo appreciated the effort, but checked his phone during every sunset. Over breakfast one day she asked, "Do you ever miss the version of us that used to share coffee instead of calendars?" He said, "I miss sleep." Layla smiled thinly. "Well, that's one thing you can't delegate." He looked up, confused, and she let it drop. Appearances became their new love language. On camera they were flawless, hand in hand at premieres, synchronized smiles at fundraisers. Off camera they spoke mostly through staff. At one event, Cameron Compton whispered, "You two look perfect together." Layla whispered back, "So do mannequins." That night, she overheard Leonardo practicing a speech in the mirror. Partnerships thrive on trust, growth, and aligned vision. She wanted to interrupt, try dinner conversation too, but bit her tongue. The irony was cinematic. The billionaire who inspired the world couldn't inspire warmth in his own home. One stormy evening, the power went out across the estate. Candles flickered, rain drummed the windows, and for the first time in months, there was no Wi-Fi to hide behind. Layla found Leonardo in the library, holding a flashlight like a soldier guarding his trophies. "Wow," she teased. "The mighty Maya's empire brought down by a thunderstorm." He smiled faintly. "Guess even the grid knows when to take a break." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that wasn't hostile, just unfamiliar. She wanted to reach for his hand, but didn't. He wanted to apologize, but couldn't find the words. Finally, he said softly, "You know I'm trying, right?" She met his eyes. "Trying is when you notice what's missing. You're surviving." When the lights came back, they went back to their roles, him the empire, her the echo. Weeks later, Leonardo surprised her with a business proposition wrapped as romance. Over dinner, he presented a proposal for her to become brand ambassador for a new luxury line tied to his company. "You'd be perfect," he said. "Elegant, trusted. It'll strengthen our image." Layla blinked. "Our image? It's strategic partnership, Layla. Win-win. Is this marriage or marketing?" He exhaled. "Can't it be both?" She laughed softly, not out of joy but disbelief. "I married a man, Leonardo, not a merger agreement." He looked hurt, though not enough to stop checking his email mid-sentence. That night, she realized something vital. She hadn't just lost his attention, she'd lost her reflection in his world. Layla sat alone on the balcony, city lights trembling below like stars that had fallen, and refused to admit it. Her phone buzzed with a text from him. "Don't forget your media prep tomorrow. Investors will be watching." She typed back, "Then let's give them a show." As she set the phone down, a quiet smile curved her lips, half sadness, half defiance. Love had turned into performance, but she was about to learn how to steal the spotlight. The camera would pan out over the glittering skyline as Layla's voiceover whispered. The sun rose like it had been hired for the event. Gold light spilled over the Myers estate. Florists hustled, chefs shouted, and publicists rehearsed smiles. It was Layla Wilkinson Myers' 30th birthday, her milestone year, according to glossy magazines that always wrote about her as if she were an exhibit. In her dressing room, mirrors surrounded her like polite paparazzi. She sat before them in a silk robe, while her stylist, Kira Porter, pinned curls with the focus of a neurosurgeon. "Big day, Mrs. Myers," Kira chirped. Layla gave a small grin. "Apparently, I hear there's a new car with my name on it. Rumor says it's the limited edition Venice X9. Ah," Layla said, "so I'm being replaced by something shinier and with better mileage." Kira laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. Downstairs, Leonardo's team moved like soldiers. The ballroom gleamed. Photographers positioned themselves strategically. A string quartet tuned instruments for a woman who, ironically, hadn't heard real music in months. By noon, guests filled the mansion. Socialites, CEOs, influencers pretending to care. Champagne glasses clinked as if applauding themselves. Cameron Compton air-kissed Layla. "30 looks good on you, darling." Layla smiled. "Thank you." I moisturize with disappointment and sarcasm. Reporters trailed her like perfume, snapping photos. Somewhere in the corner, Leonardo Myers stood with his associates, Abner Campbell and Ethan McCarthy, discussing something that involved the words market cap and quarterly forecast. Layla glanced at him across the crowd. He caught her eye, smiled briefly, then looked back at his investors. It felt less like affection, more like acknowledgement, as if she were a company asset that hadn't depreciated. Yet 2 p.m. A butler struck a glass with a spoon. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "Mr. Myers has a special surprise for his lovely wife." Layla stood by the grand staircase, every camera pointed at her. She knew the routine. The crowd would gasp. Leonardo would unveil something expensive. She would pretend it mattered. He stepped forward with a confident smile. Behind him, a velvet-draped shape waited on the driveway, clearly the new car. Her heart lifted slightly. Maybe he remembered what I said about wanting to drive again, not just be driven. He approached, holding an envelope instead of keys. "Happy birthday, Layla." Her smile froze. "Envelope first, gift later." "Open it," he said softly. She tore the flap, expecting maybe concert tickets, maybe a weekend away. Inside, legal papers, black print, her name, his, the word divorce bolded like a headline. For a second, Layla thought it was a prank, the kind Leonardo would never dare, but his assistant might accidentally email her. Then she saw the signatures, already notarized. The room tilted slightly. Someone gasped. Cameras clicked, confused. Leonardo's face remained calm, too calm. She blinked twice, then forced a laugh sharp enough to cut glass. "Well," she said, voice steady, "that's one way to avoid buying a card." Cameron's jaw dropped. "Layla, is this a joke?" Layla slipped the papers back into the envelope and smiled. "Apparently I'm the punchline." Reporters hesitated, unsure if this was performance art or a breakdown. Leonardo cleared his throat, beginning to say something, maybe an explanation, maybe a PR statement, but she lifted a hand. "Don't," she whispered. "Not here, not ever." She turned, handed the envelope to Abner Campbell, and walked out with her head high. Isa followed her like vultures, chasing Grace. Outside, the sea wind hit her like a slap, cold, real, undeserved. She kicked off her heels halfway down the driveway. Guillermo Vincent, the chauffeur, rushed forward. "Mrs. Myers." "Not today, Guillermo," she smiled weakly. "Drive yourself. I need to remember how walking feels." Each step cracked something open inside her. The laughter, the posing, the pretending, it all leaked out onto the marble behind her. By the time she reached the gate, she wasn't Mrs. Myers, icon of elegance. She was Layla Wilkinson again, the woman who once ate street tacos at 2 a.m. and believed love could survive anything. She looked back once, saw Leonardo standing on the balcony watching her go, expression unreadable. "You just fired your favorite employee," she muttered, half laughing, half crying. 3 hours later, her phone exploded with messages. "Cameron, what happened? Kira, please tell me this is a stunt." Caroline Cabrera, her therapist. "Do not reply to the press. Breathe first." Layla ignored them all. She sat in her car parked near the cliffs, the Pacific below roaring louder than her thoughts. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks in designer shades of regret. For the first time, the silence wasn't empty. It was honest. Her internal monologue danced between fury and sarcasm. "At least he didn't forget my birthday. Just the vows." She laughed, an unsteady, messy sound that startled even her. Humor had always been her armor. Now it was her oxygen. Her phone buzzed again, Leonardo's name on the screen. "Against reason," she answered. "Layla." His voice was low, careful. "I didn't want it to go like that." "Oh? You wanted confetti?" "It wasn't supposed to be public." The lawyers mixed up the folders. She laughed bitterly. "You mean you brought the divorce instead of the deal proposal?" Classic Myers efficiency. "I had my reasons." "Let me guess," she snapped. "Spreadsheets told you I'm a bad investment." He exhaled shakily. "I can't talk about this on the phone." "Good, because I'm done being on hold." She hung up before he could answer. That was 2 days later. Tabloids screamed, "Billionaire Myers files for divorce on wife's birthday." Layla Wilkinson's face graced every cover, sometimes smiling, sometimes mid-blink. The internet declared it both a scandal and a tragedy. She watched a talk show host joke. "If my husband pulled that, I'd return his car with a brick." Layla snorted into her coffee. At least someone gets it. The humor didn't erase the hurt, but it kept her heart from turning to stone. She went for walks, ignored paparazzi, and bought a cheap journal where she wrote exactly what she couldn't say aloud. One evening, Her friends Jaylee Mason and Rhett James showed up with wine and snacks. Jaylee hugged her tight. "You look like you've been emotionally steam cleaned." Layla smiled. "Thank you. It was a 2-for-1 special." Rhett poured wine. "You planning revenge or reinvention?" "Both," she said. "Revenge first, because it matches my lipstick." They spent the night mocking tabloid headlines and rewriting them. "Woman finds freedom in poorly timed divorce." 30, flirty, and finally unmarried. Meanwhile, Leonardo sat alone in his study. The same news articles played on the TV he wasn't watching. He turned off the sound and stared at his reflection in the dark window. The man staring back looked successful and lost. Abner Campbell entered quietly. "Sir, should I prepare a statement?" Leonardo shook his head. "Not yet. There's nothing to defend that doesn't sound like regret." For the first time, his own castle felt cold. He had tried to win the world and accidentally auctioned off his heart. He poured himself a drink and whispered to no one, "Happy birthday, Layla." At her friend Caroline Cabrera's apartment, Layla sat on the couch with a blanket and tea. The city buzzed below. Life was still moving, even if she wasn't sure where to step next. Caroline asked, "When was the last time you did something just for you?" Layla thought for a moment. "I breathed without permission this morning. Does that count?" They both laughed. Then Layla said, softer, "I don't hate him, you know. I hate that I let him turn me into someone waiting to be chosen." Caroline nodded. "Then maybe it's time you choose yourself." Layla looked out the window and smiled faintly. "Yeah, and this time there won't be an envelope involved." Back at the Myers estate, reporters camped outside. Layla drove up one last time, walked through the gate, and collected her things: a box of books, some photos, and the old record player they'd bought in Rome. Leonardo wasn't home. Only the house manager, Addison Sullivan, stood awkwardly in the hall. Miss Wilkinson, do you need help?" "No, Addison," Layla said kindly. "I already had too much of that." She loaded the box into her car, looked back once more at the mansion that had promised forever, and delivered a press release, then drove away with windows down and music loud. As the ocean glimmered in the rearview mirror, her voiceover would carry to the audience. She laughed at her own line, a sound stronger than tears. The camera would fade to black on her smile, not the perfect smile for magazines, but the real one that said, "I survived the worst birthday in history and still look fabulous doing it." 3 weeks after the birthday debacle, the world had already chosen sides. Half of social media called Layla Wilkinson a saint who escaped a corporate robot. The other half called her a strategic gold digger who got caught in her own spreadsheet. Layla ignored both hashtags. She had more pressing issues like figuring out why her credit cards were frozen. At a downtown cafe, her friend Rhett James slid a tablet across the table. "Read this," he said. The headline screamed, "Sources claim Layla Myers funneled millions offshore through fake accounts." She blinked. "Did I at least buy a yacht in the process?" Rhett snorted. "No yacht, just a smear campaign." Somewhere across the city, Leonardo Myers read the same headline and felt his stomach tighten. He didn't want to believe it, but the anonymous email in his inbox, complete with bank receipts, had looked convincing. Transfers in Layla's name, foreign accounts, large sums. Pride whispered, "You've been played." Logic whispered, "Ask her." Pride won. In his office, Leonardo sat staring at the evidence again. His assistant, Addison Sullivan, entered quietly. "Sir, you haven't eaten since morning." He ignored her. "Addison, run a background check on these transactions." "Already did. They lead to a research institute in Zurich." His brow furrowed. "What kind of research?" "Medical. Something to do with genetic therapy." "For what company?" "Not a company, sir. A foundation. Private donor listed as Layla Wilkinson." He sat back, stunned. If she wasn't embezzling, what was she doing with millions in secret transfers? A whisper of doubt crept in, but his ego shoved it aside. She could still be covering for someone, he muttered. Addison hesitated. Sir, I know it's not my place, but maybe you should just ask her. He glared. Addison, people lie when you give them a warning. Numbers don't. The truth was, he wasn't angry at Layla. He was angry at how much it would hurt if she was innocent. Across town, Layla sat in a quiet hospital room, holding her mother's hand. Lily Lou looked fragile beneath the white sheets, her eyes closed in exhaustion. The machines beeped softly, a metronome for hope. Cameron Compton had helped arrange this private wing under a fake name to avoid media exposure. Few knew Lily was alive. Fewer knew she was dying of a rare neuromuscular disease. The research center in Zurich was developing an experimental treatment, funded almost entirely by Layla's own accounts. She looked at her mother and smiled. You always said money can't buy love. Turns out it might buy a miracle, though. Her mother chuckled weakly. As long as it's not refundable. For weeks, Layla had kept this secret. Leonardo hated public vulnerability. She could imagine him framing her mother's illness as a brand risk, so she'd hidden it. And now that silence had cost her a marriage. When Leonardo finally showed up at the hospital, he didn't know what he was walking into. He had tracked the wire trail himself and followed it to Lily Lou's room. Layla looked up, eyes wide with shock and fury. Oh, you found me. What's wrong? Did the private investigator run out of binoculars? I needed answers, he said quietly. And divorce papers were step one. He glanced at the machines. What is this, Layla? My mother, she said. Or what's left of her, thanks to a disease you couldn't pronounce, if I gave you a teleprompter. He flinched. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. You don't ask questions that don't affect stock prices. He looked ashamed. I saw the transfers. I thought you were running off with someone. Layla laughed bitterly. The only man I've been seeing regularly is Dr. Aaron Esquivel, and he's 80 and wears Crocs. That earned a smile through his guilt. Layla, why didn't you tell me? Because you stopped listening long before I stopped talking. She turned away, and for the first time since the divorce, he looked small, not rich, not powerful, just a man realizing he'd broken something irreplaceable. That night, Leonardo sat alone in his car, outside the hospital. He could still see Layla's face every time he blinked. Angry, beautiful, tired of being strong. He called Addison Sullivan. Cancel the press tour, he said. Sir, just do it, and find me a donation channel for the Zurich project. Addison hesitated. Anonymous. He nodded. Always, inside the hospital. Layla stood at her mother's bedside, reading an email from the foundation. A new anonymous benefactor has covered this month's trial costs. She didn't have to guess who. For the first time in weeks, she whispered, Thank you, Leonardo. Not to forgive, but to acknowledge that remorse was at least human. Days passed. The press moved on to fresher dramas, but inside both souls, quiet storms raged. A week later, they met by accident in the hospital cafe. She was buying coffee. He was donating money under a false name that the clerk mispronounced badly. They froze for a moment that felt both awkward and unavoidable. Layla broke the tension first. So, Mr. Anonymous Donor, trying to buy karma on discount. He smiled sadly, just hoping it's on sale. They sat together for the first time since the party. No press, no contracts, no defense. Just two people sharing lukewarm coffee and an even colder truth. I'm sorry, he said simply. I know, she replied. I just don't know if that's enough. He nodded. Maybe it isn't, but it's a start. For a brief moment, they smiled like they used to. Two souls who'd learned that money buys comfort, but never context. That night, Layla tucked her mother in and walked onto the balcony, overlooking the city. The air was crisp, the stars unimpressed by scandals. Inside his penthouse, Leonardo looked at their wedding photo again. For the first time, he didn't feel anger or defeat, just an aching admiration for the woman who'd kept his heart alive, even while he was busy killing it. He raised his glass, not in celebration, but in respect, and whispered, "To Layla, the only deal I should have read the fine print on." The camera would pull back, 2 windows, 2 lives, 2 souls quietly beginning to understand that love's cruelty sometimes comes from fear, and that forgiveness is the only currency worth keeping. When Layla Wilkinson Myers left the estate for good, the media expected a meltdown. Instead, they got a woman in ripped jeans, sunglasses, and the kind of quiet that made headlines nervous. Her driver, Guillermo Vincent, watched her toss a final box into the trunk. "Where to, Miss Wilkinson?" Layla grinned. "Anywhere that doesn't require a press release." She rented a small apartment above a bakery in Santa Monica. The place smelled of yeast, coffee, and second chances. The landlord, Kaylee Hebert, warned, "Walls are thin, plumbing's older than the moon." Layla smiled. "Perfect. I'm done with perfection anyway." That first night, she slept on the floor with nothing but a pillow and peace, both luxuries she hadn't felt in years. The next morning, the bakery downstairs carried newspapers with her face still on them. "Discarded wife goes incognito, sources say she's baking bread and vengeance." Layla bought 2 copies, one to laugh at, one to line her trash can. Behind the counter, Addison Sullivan's cousin, Cade Lugo, recognized her. "Wait, aren't you?" "Used to be," she interrupted. "Now I'm just hungry." As the weeks passed, curiosity waned. The world found new scandals. She found quiet. Mornings were for yoga on the balcony. Afternoons for figuring out bills. For the first time, Layla learned the thrill of doing laundry without staff and the tragedy of folding fitted sheets. One afternoon, she joined a support group at a local community center, led by Quinn Morales, a life coach whose entire wardrobe seemed motivational. "Pain," Quinn declared, "is expensive, but recovery, that's interest paid back to yourself." Layla raised a brow. "Do you also sell mugs with that quote?" Quinn laughed. "Not yet, but you just gave me a marketing idea." That exchange sparked an idea. What if emotional recovery could be more than therapy circles? What if it could be a brand, a lifestyle that turned heartbreak into empowerment? Layla began sketching on napkins, designing what she called Relux Wellness for the Wounded and Stylish. She poured in her savings, built a minimalist website, and posted her first video. Running Relux was chaos. Layla learned about shipping delays, inventory nightmares, and customers who thought self-love candles should come with refunds for their exes. At 2 a.m., she'd called Jaylee Mason, her unofficial CFO, for moral support. "Why did I think entrepreneurship was romantic?" Layla groaned. Jaylee laughed. "Because you once married a billionaire. You have a type suffering in Gucci." Each setback taught her something, that freedom was messy, that independence didn't come with room service, and that success felt sweeter when earned in sweatpants. Months later, her brand was featured in Bloom magazine. From boardroom to breakthrough, Layla Wilkinson's new empire of healing. Meanwhile, Leonardo Myers sat in his office, watching a Relux interview on his tablet. The reporter asked, "What's your message to women who've lost everything?" Layla smiled through the screen. "Then you have nothing left to fear. Build again." He paused the video, his reflection overlapping hers. Abner Campbell entered. "Sir, you've watched that clip 4 times. Leonardo sighed. 5 would be obsessive. "I'm pacing myself." He had never been prouder of her, or more aware that he no longer belonged in her story. That night, he donated $1 million to a women's entrepreneurship fund under the name Anonymous Supporter. Months later, Relux held its first live seminar at a downtown hall. Seats sold out in hours. Hundreds of women showed up wearing hope and discount heels. Layla stepped on stage in a simple white dress. No diamonds, no script. The crowd roared. "Good evening," she began. When I was 30, I got divorced on my birthday. It was the worst party favor ever. But look at me now, still here, still standing, and finally wearing comfortable shoes. Laughter erupted. Tears too. In the back row, Leonardo Myers sat in a cap and hoodie, watching. When she looked his way, their eyes met for a heartbeat, long enough for both to feel the weight of growth. She continued, "You can lose a fortune and still be rich in peace. And peace, my friends, has no market value. It's priceless." Applause rose like thunder. Leonardo stood quietly, clapping too, not for what they had been, but for what she had become. After the event, Layla walked alone along the pier, the ocean glittering like forgiveness. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She smiled, typed back one word, "Finally." The gold-embossed envelope arrived on Leonardo Myers' desk with a stack of investor reports. He almost tossed it aside until he noticed the seal, Relux Foundation Gala 2026. The same brand whose founder's smile haunted every financial magazine lately. He opened it. Inside, "You are cordially invited to the Relux Women's Impact Gala, benefiting global wellness initiatives." At the bottom, in elegant print, "Event host, Layla Wilkinson." Leonardo leaned back in his chair, muttering, "Of course. The universe has a sense of humor, and she's on her board." Abner Campbell peeked in. "Another charity event, sir. Not just another. It's hers. You going?" Leonardo hesitated. "Would you skip your own Judgment Day?" He ordered his tailor to deliver the black tux he hadn't worn since their anniversary. It suddenly felt tighter around the chest. The night of the gala arrived dressed in flashbulbs. The Beverly Hall was wrapped in banners of silver and ivory. Paparazzi lined the steps like worshippers. Layla Wilkinson emerged from a white car, wearing a golden gown that shimmered like victory itself. Elegant, simple, unapologetic. Her name trended online within minutes. "Layla returns." Inside, the air smelled of perfume, ambition, and redemption. Celebrities mingled, cameras panned, and a jazz trio played softly beneath the clinking of crystal glasses. Cameron Compton whispered to Jaylee Mason, "She's glowing." Jaylee replied, "That's what peace looks like on a budget of self-respect." And then Leonardo entered. The chatter dimmed, not from hostility, but awe. Even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath. Layla saw him across the hall. Their eyes met like old rivals who'd finally remembered they once fought for the same cause. When it was time for her keynote, Layla stepped onto the stage. The audience rose in applause. Flashes sparkled like fireworks. She waited for silence, smiled, and began. "2 years ago, I got divorced on my birthday. It was dramatic. 0 stars, would not recommend. But that moment taught me something. When life closes a mansion door, it sometimes opens a studio apartment with better lighting, more laughter. True wealth," she continued, voice softening, "isn't what you keep, it's what you build after you're broken." Every eye was on her, including Leonardo's. "Tonight," she said, "Relux partners with the Myers Foundation to fund women's startups worldwide." Yes, you heard me right. The past and the present finally agree on something useful. Gasps, applause. Leonardo blinked he hadn't known. After the speech, the ballroom buzzed. Leonardo found her on the balcony overlooking downtown lights. She didn't turn when he approached. "Nice speech," he said quietly. "Didn't know I was sponsoring my own public humbling." She smiled. "Consider it your tax-deductible character development." He chuckled. "You really planned all this, didn't you?" "I planned the gala," she replied. "Your guilt RSVP'd on its own." He exhaled. "I deserved worse." She met his eyes. "You did, but I got better." Silence stretched, comfortable this time. Below them, camera flashes glittered like falling stars. He said softly, "You look happy." "I am. Without me. Layla grinned. That's the secret ingredient. They both laughed, the first shared laugh since the storm. Inside, the master of ceremonies announced a surprise video tribute. The lights dimmed. On screen appeared footage of Reluxa's work, shelters, scholarships, wellness clinics. Then, unexpectedly, a caption, "Special thanks to our anonymous benefactor." The video cut to Leonardo Myers signing donation forms. Unaware of the hidden camera Abner had left running months ago for internal archives. Gasps filled the room. Layla turned to him, stunned. "You were the benefactor," he whispered. "Guilty as rebranded." Applause erupted, first hesitant, then thunderous. The press framed it as a reconciliation moment, though neither said a word. For Leonardo, it wasn't exposure, it was relief. The secret was no longer his to guard. For Layla, it was clarity. Forgiveness wasn't a surrender, it was a release. As the band began a slow tune, Jaylee nudged Layla. "Go on, you owe the universe one last dance." Layla hesitated, then crossed the floor toward Leonardo. "One dance," she said, "for old tax break's sake." He smiled. "That's the most romantic offer I've had in years." They moved together, not as lovers reclaiming the past, but as equals acknowledging it. Cameras flashed, but they didn't care. The world saw glamour. They felt closure. When the song ended, Layla stepped back. "Thank you for showing up." He nodded. "Thank you for showing me up." Outside, as guests departed, Leonardo watched her laugh with friends beneath the marble archway. No bitterness, no regret. Abner joined him. "She did it, sir. She really built something beautiful." Leonardo smiled. "She always did. I just finally noticed." Later, in her car, Layla looked out the window at the city skyline, shimmering like 1,000 new beginnings. Her voiceover would close the act. The morning after the Relux Gala, tabloids called it the reunion of the century. Layla Wilkinson sat at her kitchen table, reading headlines while spreading jam on toast. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Publicists, journalists, strangers who suddenly remembered they'd once sat near her in high school. She smirked. "I get divorced, and suddenly everyone wants to be my therapist." Guillermo Vincent, now her driver-turned-friend, dropped off flowers. "They're from M," he said, handing over the card. Layla opened it. "Thank you for the dance." She smiled softly. Took him 7 years to figure out thank you cards exist. That afternoon, Layla visited her mother at the rehabilitation center. Lily was stronger now, color back in her cheeks, sarcasm fully restored. "So," Lily said, "I saw the gala on TV. You glowed." He sweated. Layla laughed. Accurate summary. Her mother squeezed her hand. "You know, sweetheart, forgiveness isn't about letting him back. It's about letting you out." Layla nodded. "I already did. He's free to be whoever he's learning to be, and I'm free to stop proofreading his soul." They both chuckled, then watched the sunset through the hospital window. Quiet, golden, honest. He didn't mail it. He folded it into his journal and closed it like a confession. Abner Campbell peeked in. "You going to send that?" Leonardo smiled. "No, but I needed to read it to myself." A month later, Layla appeared on a morning show, hosted by Brandon Peterson. He leaned forward, eyebrows dramatic. "Everyone wants to know, did you forgive him?" Layla smiled thoughtfully. "Forgiveness isn't a door you open once. It's more like a revolving one. You keep walking through until you stop bumping into yourself." Laughter in the studio. "And if he asked for a second chance?" Brandon pressed. She grinned. "I'd offer him coffee, then send him the bill." The clip went viral, not because of scandal, but because of her calm. Viewers saw a woman who'd turned pain into poise and decided to make maturity fashionable again. 2 weeks later, fate staged. Layla was in Central Park for a relax outdoor event when she spotted a familiar silhouette feeding pigeons near the fountain. Leonardo, minus the entourage, looking human for a change. She walked over. "I see the Empire's new board meeting has feathers." He smiled. They listened better than shareholders. They stood side by side, awkward only for a heartbeat. "I watched your interview," he said. "Good. I charge extra for reruns." He laughed softly. "You really are happy, aren't you?" Layla nodded. For once, happiness doesn't need your signature. He reached into his coat and handed her an envelope. This one small plain, unsealed. Inside, a donation receipt for 10 new wellness centers under her foundation's name. She looked up, eyes bright. "You're impossible." He shrugged. "I'm improving." They hugged, not lovers rekindled, but companions graduating from sorrow. That night, Layla returned to her apartment, placed the envelope beside her mother's framed photo, and opened the balcony doors. The city pulsed below, alive, forgiving. She poured a glass of wine and toasted the sky. "To the mistakes that taught me manners." Her voiceover would drift through the final montage. "He taught me what love without listening looks like. Life taught me that leaving isn't failure, it's feedback." And somewhere between heartbreak and healing, I found myself laughing again.